Very good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga. We're broadcasting live from the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos.
It's a beautiful Thursday morning. Feels like we've nearly reached the finish line in a marathon. Welcome to your perfect morning starter that makes the race even the more beautiful. I am Bukola Koka. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi, Bukola. Of course, Kyle is taking a break. Everybody taking turns.
It's like you gave him the baton, right?
Yeah, literally, because the year is coming to an end, so next year is going to be very busy. The elections are coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of conversation in the polity that everyone has to build up for. A lot of work is in the works, and a lot of evaluation as well will be happening. The APC, the ruling party, is mobilizing whatever it is it says it has done for Nigeria and Nigerians. The opposition is also dusting up his books to say you've not done this, that, or the other. So that is the oppositions that are put together. We don't know yet. Because the opposition seem to be in disarray. So that's why everybody seems to be preparing for the inevitable. I love election seasons because it's always a time to check the books. But Bukola, beyond elections, we must look at how all of this impacts the lives of Nigerians. That is what is most important. Because what I've realized, I don't think is a Nigerian problem, but Nigeria is part of the nations that has caught that bug and has refused to let it go, which is we seem to be talking a lot about elections. In fact, the best time, Bukola, maybe after just a year after any administration, the next thing everybody's talking about the next election. Just watch what will happen after this election. For instance, if Bola Tinubu wins the election, for instance, you'll see that literally everybody will forget about him. Everybody will talk who is going to be the next. If he loses, there's 2 days. My concern generally on this, sorry, I didn't even know I'm going to go in this direction. My concern generally is we must build the country first before we begin to talk about this cycle of elections. And there's a trend that I see among people, especially those that I say are above the waters, elites, for instance, who I realize that as soon as Nigeria is good for Bukola and is good for Jeffrey, we feel that Nigeria is good for everybody.
Absolutely.
We can't build a nation like that, Bukola.
Jeffrey, you have signposted an uncomfortable ethos that seems to be part of our political culture, and it appears to have come to stay. Once the elite are comfortable, with the abundance of political gains that come their way, then, every other part of Nigeria is okay. And, the understanding is that the problems of Nigeria cannot not be solved by one administration. Well, they say there's continuity in governance. And so if one administration finishes all the, challenges, solving all the challenges, or the, infrastructure deficit and developmental deficit, then what will the next administration do? But when we move beyond that point and, aspire for excellence in development, and then we'll be moving closer, to the transformation that we've always talked about as far as Nigeria is concerned. But Jeffrey, you started off by talking about elections. Speaking of elections, the House of Representatives, rather the National Assembly, is proposing, something very, very significant as far as elections is concerned, that the burden of proof the responsibility for the burden of proof be shouldered henceforth by INEC. And there was a very rigorous debate, on this particular subject matter on the floor of the upper chamber, the Senate, yesterday. And, that has set the tone for the electoral reforms and the other elements in it. And, we're going to look at it significantly on the program today, but questions should be asked about how this will make INEC more accountable, particularly if that very annoying challenge of INEC officials being, in bed with politicians, that influence of politicians had not been taken away from INEC. Will INEC wield this particular power, or if you like, exercise this this particular responsibility responsibly, such that we can now rely on election results that INEC declares and defends at the court should the matter go to the court. But prior to this time, we also know that the National Assembly is also proposing that elections be concluded in 2026, talking about change of date, such that, if litigations were to arise, and they always do, after elections have been fought and won, then, they would have been solved before swearing-in date. So we'll continue to look critically at the reforms and the proposals being put forward by the National Assembly ahead of the elections, look at how well-intentioned they are and how they will change, the conduct of our elections, the delivery of time, the delivery of the elections in time, and of course, the political culture, how they will make our elections more credible and more accountable. Continue to look holistically at that process. So that came through from the National Assembly yesterday. Jeffrey. Absolutely.
It's going to be one of the core part of our conversation today. As a matter of fact, before I tell the people what we're doing today, I was on leave when the chairman of INEC was being screened, and when he was nominated, screened, and eventually confirmed. For me, he just has only one job. Just one job. Just make people's votes count. I know he's one man, he can't be everywhere. However, I can make that culture across board, because if you look across board, compromise across our institutions of state is one of the biggest problems. Whether it's police, INEC, judiciary, the list is on. There's a lot of compromise and in some of these places. So it's not going to be built in overnight. So we hope we can do this. But beyond that, Bukola, again, ASU has said we are suspending our strike for a month to give the federal government an opportunity to meet some of the demands we've made. And whenever I hear issues around ASU, I'm like, oh no, not again. The last time I was here and we had a conversation with the ASU chairman, one of the things that were listed as part of the demands, I told him to put it in numbers in terms of figure. How much are we talking about here? And the money was less than 10 billion. What in the world is 10 billion to the federal government? And this back and forth and all of that is just quite disgraceful that we always come here. This is beginning to look more like the American politics, because where there's always a shutdown or threat of shutdown. For instance, the government is shut down. It's been shut down for days. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the government has reopened yet again. And follows and people may be losing their job in America. You'll see again, maybe next year, there's going to be issues around shutdown. So it looks like a game that is being played in American politics. That's how it happens with ASU and federal government. Every time and again, we always have this issue. What is this issue that cannot be resolved? I don't think this issue is impossible to resolve. And when you talk about the figures in terms of monies that are involved, if we prioritize education, this should not be a conversation. So it's very tiring all the time that we're talking ASU. Now there's a new leadership of ASU. But let's take a listen to the ASU leadership as far as this new development is concerned.
The ASU team met on Thursday 16th and Saturday 18th of October 2025, respectively, with the Yahya Ahmed-led FGN team to consider government's response to the draft renegotiated 2009 FGN-ASU agreement. Another date was also fixed for the next round of deliberations by the two teams at the last meeting. We certainly have not achieved the twin objectives of concluding the renegotiation, which started way back in 2017, and fully addressing other lingering issues. However, we are definitely not where we were prior to and at the commencement of the strike. While noting that a lot more work is still required, NEC came to the conclusion that the objective of the warning strike had been partly achieved. Hence, it was decided that the ongoing strike be reviewed to allow for a conducive atmosphere for further engagement between the two parties. In summary, NEC meeting resolved that 1, the warning strike is hereby suspended with immediate effect from midnight, Wednesday, the 22nd of October, 2025. 2, Should government fail to resolve the issues within the 1 month window, ASU reserves the right to resume the strike without further notice at all.
Yes, indeed. President of ASU there, Professor Chris Piwuna, addressing the press, letting the press know and indeed the public that ASU has decided to call off the strike and giving the federal government 1 month to resolve all issues. And, you know, this, of course, follows the intervention by the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, to be precise. And we also heard Professor Chris Piwuna days ago appearing before the National Assembly talking about the issues of funding. And following this, we know that there is a renewed effort by different arms of government to intervene in this, you know, age-long dispute since 2009. As Jeffrey had said earlier on, these issues are resolvable within, you know, a very short period of time. And we recall that Professor Chris Piwuna had appeared on this program and talked about the earned academic allowances and, of course, all the other issues that they, in fact, had to compromise on the earned academic allowances, which, you know, at the initial stage was over 100 billion naira, not the 50 billion that the federal government has now released to ASU. And, of course, there are the other issues of funding, of the revitalization of funding for universities, the remuneration, 25 to 35%. These issues have been spoken to sufficiently, you know, by even the Minister of Education, but they are indeed resolvable if the federal government prioritizes education and, in fact, demonstrates that indeed it is committed to developing education. Don't forget that amid this conversation, the academic institutions, the tertiary institutions, have made us understand that 303 lecturers have been lost, you know, to the Japa syndrome in this year alone. And that is, you know, that is discomforting to note that even the Japa syndrome is encroaching into our academic institutions, into Nigeria's education sector, from the medical institutions to banking, even to aviation and to the tertiary institution. But there are other issues that also played out, particularly in the last 48 hours, because if you consider all of the sides to the story, it's a developing one. In a dramatic turn of events, the defense of the IPOB leader, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, has said that they're ready to commence with defending his trial. And, you know, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has listed some very prominent Nigerians as witnesses, some as compellable witnesses. We heard the name of the Minister of the FCT on that list. Retired Major General Theophilus Danjuma is on that list. Even the Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, is on that list. And this comes after, you know, protests led by the presidential candidate of the AAC that, you know, federal government should release Nnamdi Kanu. The groundswell of opinion is that he is a prisoner of conscience, and in fact that this trial has gone on for too long. And so the defense of this trial has begun, and so we'll be looking critically at that process and see how it unfolds. But how this material witnesses and compelling witnesses, how they affect the case is what we don't understand. Maybe it will become clear in the coming days. Jeffrey.
If there's one case that some kind of evasion has been happening to, is the case of Nnamdi Kanu. It's very unclear to all of us how the witnesses will help his case, because the list is a long list. I was just humoring through the list, and I said this is literally summoning a Federal Executive Council meeting. Abubakar Malami, former AGF, is there. And yes, on Wike FCT Minister Theophilus Danjuma, former Lieutenant General and Chief of Army Staff, also took up a retire. We also have, as we said, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos, and Uzodinma, Governor of Imo State. Dave Umahi, Okezekpe Azu, Ahmed Rufai, Abubakar, and we also have Yusuf Bichi. That's the DSS former boss and all of that. So it's a long list, but we're not sure of how he intends to use his testimonies to his defense, or whether these people are aware that they they actually come into court, but they'll be subpoenaed by the court. But this is one of those cases I would like to sit in court and witness and see for myself, not that I read it anywhere. But in Nnamdi Kanu's case, it's an interesting one, twists and turns. I followed this case for quite a while, and one of the things that people should not assume is that government doesn't know what they are doing. Government knows exactly what they are doing, but we may not know what it is that government is doing. But what everybody's trying to say, okay, let this trial go on. If he's guilty, you know, put him in prison for as long as the sentence or the law allows. If he's free, let the man go. All of that. But there's been these delay tactics back and forth. In fact, you remember this, there was a case got to Supreme Court, and then it was now sent back to this particular court because I followed that case from High Court to appeal to Supreme Court, and then it was returned, letting go and face trial. And the Supreme Court even said, yes, it was wrong the way he was extradited to Nigeria. He has a right to file the fundamental human right, the breach of his right on that end. But the issue of treasonable treason and the things that the federal government is accusing him of, he must face trial for it. That's why they sent him back to the High Court. I'm happy that eventually he said, I'm ready to open defense on this particular case. Let this be history. If the man is guilty, let him go to prison for whatever it is he has done. If he's free, because that's why you see all of these agitations happening, and Shawore leading the protest said, this is one too many, and all of that. But I don't know how this case is going to end, but this is one case I wish it was happening in Lagos. I would love to sit in court and witness it for myself. Well, you can whether these guys will be able to show up and what he will use their witnesses to do. But hey, guys, let's tell you exactly what we'll be doing today on the program. It's a list of things we'll be talking about, and it has to do with what's playing out in the politics. First, has to do with national security. A girl, we understand, that was kidnapped a few days ago. Well, we're not sure of this story, but we're going to talk to someone who is particularly sure of that. I'm sure you saw that viral video of a girl who was pointed a gun at. Now, some stories are saying she's been killed, and some are saying not exactly. So we'll try to find out exactly what played out. What is this thing about pre-election season and the surge in insecurity? There's a nexus that we need to question exactly what is playing out, and that is why we're bringing this conversation to the fore. And from there, we'll move on to looking critically at the ongoing Electoral Act amendment process. Is it moving us closer to the template of Electoral Act that would be ideal to shape our electoral processes going forward, particularly as the nation now has a new INEC boss, as confirmed by the Senate, and so the test for his capacity and his experience and leadership begins with the Anambra election. So we'll look at all of the proposals that have come through from the National Assembly and, of course, civil society. That's part of the conversation. I do know that harmonization process is ongoing there in retreat to give us a full picture of what the proposal will look like before it will proceed to voting and deliberation, maybe to eventual law. But from there, we'll be talking about the Niger Delta. Whilst you talk about the wealth of the Niger Delta, you should also remember the issues around oil spill. And now there's a conversation around exploration in Ogoniland that has not been happening since the incident of Kensarawiwa. We're going to mop up all of the issues and bring the Niger Delta issue to the fore yet again, with focus on environment and oil spills. Bukola, I know you're not from the Niger Delta. I know this issue firsthand is pathetic. The level of aquatic destruction oil spill can do to an environment. I don't think people who are not from here really appreciate. And if you really appreciate it, you understand why there's always some form of agitation or the other. Indeed, Jeffrey, you served in Bayelsa. I served in Bayelsa, so I have a bit of an experience of what these challenges look like. So I identify with what the Niger Deltans are going through. And that's why it's important to continue to have the conversation. But you have the conversation set out for you today on the program, so you can interact with us on the emails that will be showing on your screen intermittently. So what is it for you, the electoral reform or the security situation in the country? So just joining on the conversation,
You are the third anchor on the show today, of course, with Kayode's absence for the period of time that he'll be away. So join us, be part of the conversation. We'll take a moment now. When we return, it'll be time to dive deep into the front pages. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
All right, so let's get to the dailies and take a look at what some of these dailies are saying. Let's bring in our guests and analyst, public affairs analyst Ambrose Igboke. He joins us virtually. Mr. Igboke, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, good morning. It's Igboke, not Igboke.
My apologies. You know, we're used to the W in the name. All right, yeah. Thank you so much. Let's begin with the Vanguard newspaper, Mr. Igboke. It leads with some charge from the governor of Niger State talking about insecurity. When he talked about insecurity, he said, defend yourselves. Governor Bago charges Niger residents, vows never to negotiate or pay ransom to bandits. I'm not sure what signal he's sending, because if you're saying defend yourself, how should they defend themselves? Nigerian government, Nigerian law doesn't allow people to bear arms. What exactly do you think he's talking about here, Mr. Igboke?
I don't understand what he's talking about, because what would the people defend themselves with? With their bare arms? Or are they going to use their cutlasses and knives in the kitchen to defend themselves? Or are they going to use bow and arrow against sophisticated weaponry from the terrorists that are ravaging them? So I think rather than the governor say this, I think he should bring up some kind of security mechanism that is in-house to see how he can use that to support whatever the military and the police and other security agencies are doing. For example, what happens to the forest guards? Some other states are also coming up with forest guards, equipping them with weaponry so that they can also fight back. So what happens to the security watch? So there are parameters allowed by the Constitution for states to bring up their own security apparatus. I think the governor should explore that, and then it should also involve the local vigilante, equip them. The civilian JTF did wonderful things in the far north when the crisis of Boko Haram was at a very high level. So he could also try to inculcate such parameters to his security. He should employ the local hands, and so that they can join in fighting. But telling people just through television speech to defend yourself, defend with what? So our leaders should stop saying these kind of things. They should roll up their sleeves and get to work to combat this insecurity ravaging the people whom they are governing.
Well said. I would have loved. So in case our audience, if you want to see more of the thoughts of the governor of Niger State, Governor Umar Bago, you can go to page 6 of the Vanguard newspaper. Mr. Igboke, a few other stories I'd like you to touch on, and that has to do with, on the side, you see state complicity fueling religious killings in Nigeria. That is accredited to some faith leaders. You know, the issue about Nigeria being designated or to be designated as a nation of concern, and we've seen video of a particular cleric, a preacher, who is saying, look, whatever is being said is true, because there's the argument of whether there is genocide against Christians. You know, the government has said there is no such thing, but the people are saying, look, you're being selective with the truth. There is genocide against Christians, and there's that argument back and forth whether there is. But they are saying that the attitude of the states in terms of institutions of state is even what is fueling some of these killings that is termed genocide against Christians. What do you make of it?
Well, if we remove the politics of it and face the statistics of it, it is very clear that the majority of the victims of this carnage over the years have been Christians. When we think of, it seems to forget so easily about the bombings of churches in southern Kaduna, the Madala issue is still very fresh in our memory on the Christmas period when the church was bombed on the 26th of December, when at the peak of Christmas. We know of the killings in Benue, In my own state, Enugu State here, sometime in 2016 at Uzuwani, people gathered in church for morning prayer and they were massacred. So when you check the statistics, what of in Plateau, where basically almost all the victims have been Christians. So if we want to, not to sound politically correct, but to look at statistics, you'll find out that some people, some schools of thought who are saying that it is a faith genocide, may not be totally incorrect, because when you check the statistics, you find out that majority of those that are killed have been Christians. That is why the state needs to step in so that these dichotomy and fear of oppression over a particular faith does not magnify. The state itself is not enough to issue press conferences when this kind of things happen. We need to roll up our sleeves and see how we can, using international partners, and there are a lot of friends of Nigeria, even among the world superpowers. These things can be, actually defeated. My take always over the years is that the Nigerian military have what it takes to crush these insurgency. Why that is not happening, well, it is left for anybody's imagination.
Absolutely. Before we jump to the next daily, just a touch on this. We're seeing on page 19, still on staying with the Vanguard newspaper, we're seeing on the side, on the left side, that should be your left side, that your right side now, Aliko Dangote to sell 10% stake in refinery on NGX. With the back and forth between them and Pengassan, all the players in that sector, argument over importation versus refining locally and its market share. Now, the ambition for Nigeria is to be two things, or to primarily, basically to have energy security and also to be a net exporter of petroleum product. With Dangote refinery and other refineries coming on stream, we're getting to that point, but there seems to be this industry-wide agitation over workers and all of that. But the other part is, which I want you to speak to, is that to improve governance structure is to be quoted on the exchange and 10%. I think it's time for Nigerians to take advantage of this and co-own a multi-billion dollar company. What do you make of it?
Well, it's a good opportunity, at least it's a starting point, but 10%, if you sell 10% of the company to the public and you hold on to 90% of the company, that's an overwhelming majority. And if you understand the way the boardroom politics works, even 49% over 51%, you find out that the 51% is still a majority stakeholder, or shareholder. But it's a good move, because a company of that nature is so huge. It's good that it's not controlled by just one person and his, private investors. But it's good to go public. But these are the things we should watch, so that people have more say in what happens in a company, and also be able to come to the defense of the company when things happen like that. But I think over the years, they may be able to expand to give out up to 30 or 40%. But as it is now, the 10% is a good start, but it's still very, very, it's a minority stake, a very huge minority stake. And by the time people come to invest, because it's only one person or group that will buy that 10%, by the time you fragment it into the various shareholders, you find out that the highest shareholder at that 10% may just be maybe 0.5 or 1%. And therefore, Dangote still have a very, very strong, firm grip in what happens there.
Well, the man may be protecting his business. You may never know at the end of the day. Let's get to the Guardian newspaper. And it leads with a big one with the faces there. The president, the minister of finance and coordinating minister of the economy, Wale Edo. I can see Adedeji there, the FIRS guy. Now it's going to be Nigeria Revenue Service. And then the customs. FG begins public finance reforms ahead of the new tax regime in January. That's a page 6 read on the Guardian newspaper. If there's anything agitating the minds of Nigerians beside the next election cycle, the general election in 2027, is the tax reform. And now some housekeeping is being done as far as this reform. I don't have all the details, but what do you make of it as far as the policies and these reforms are concerned?
I think there is not enough sensitization and awareness created about the new tax reforms. Most of the things we hear are fragments of information in the newspaper and the mainstream media. I think the FIRS should do more, and the Ministry of Finance and whoever the stakeholders that are involved, the Ministry of Information. But many Nigerians don't even understand the complexities or the new things they are trying to introduce in these tax systems. We heard about the one that is going to affect our bank accounts, whether you are going to have a TIN or not from January 1. So there's so much discordant tune going on in this sector and about this very particular policy. What can happen is let them wrap up on their, information and sensitization, so that even everybody, even the person selling on the streets or in the market, should know what they are talking about. At this level, even a lot of civil servants and the upper middle class don't even understand what you're talking about. The educated ones don't even understand the complexity of where you're trying to roll out. How much more those who are not even educated. So I hope this also will not cause panic, because we don't want to go back to a situation where people will withdraw their money from the banks and keep them at home. It will affect the fluidity in the markets and then the liquidity also. So let us also try to see that these reforms do not affect the culture we are trying to introduce, especially cultures when it comes to banking. We are talking about that a lot of Nigerians are unbanked, especially the informal sector. So if you want to, some of them have started going to the bank again, and if you want to discourage them with some of these complexities, they are so keep their money under their pillow, or some people will slash their mattress and put their money as they used to do in those days, or even dig a hole in their compound and keep it and say that I don't understand what the government is doing. So to make sure that we avoid these kinds of lethargy in the sector, I think the policy pushers owes a lot of explanation and a lot of sensitization, town hall meetings and all those things to introduce. You don't just sit in Abuja and create some policies and shove it down our throats without making us understand the nitty-gritty of what you have given us. So I will challenge the Ministry of Finance, the CBN, the FIRS, and all those people who are involved in this to ensure that Nigerians understand in their various languages and even in Pidgin English and all those things, to ensure that people understand the basics of this new policy.
Mr. Booker, before I let you go, I don't think the government, whether federal or state or at any level, should blame Nigerians for being hesitant. There's tax compliance hesitancy anywhere in the world. Nobody loves to pay taxes, but especially in climes like ours, where we see some public officials embezzle these funds and we don't see what these monies are used for. So the hesitancy is even going to be worse. But let me ask you a question. I had a conversation with someone who lives in London as to some of these issues. Of course, Bola Tinubu is very good at optimization. That's the president now. When it comes to, he's an accountant, Devt is an accountant. So if you talk to an accountant, generally they're always looking for how to, get money out of the system. Every profession has their bias. So that's the bias of an accountant, how to put the money, how to optimize to leverage the system to get more people into the tax nest. How the money is utilized is a different kettle of fish. So some persons were saying that the payee or personal income tax, nobody should even pay it at all, because money is safer in the hands of people. Because the federal government says, of course, we have it on record that in terms of Naira terms, there is record FAC allocation right now under this administration, sometimes 2 trillion in terms of what they've generated to share. But some people are saying the monies are safer in the hands of the people. Let them not pay tax, but they will be forced to spend, whether they spend it senselessly or sensibly. That's a different kettle of fish than giving it to government, who sometimes end up in the pockets of a few persons. What do you make? Where is our money safer, in people's pockets or in the government's hands?
Well, people who are saying this are turning economics on its head, and maybe they forget so easily about socialism. The socialism was practiced for some number of years in the Eastern Bloc of especially the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic then, and which has Russia today and some other, Ukraine and some other countries. They practice socialism, and that is the concept that's been, as you just mentioned now, where the money is in the hands of the state, and then people live as a welfare, no tax payments, nothing, you live by the welfare of the state. It didn't work. I mean, as of 1990, 1991, all the Berlin Wall fell, Russia, the USSR disintegrated, Russia, so what we are seeing now, everybody is gradually moving to capitalism. But on the other hand, capitalism, that the people who collect tax and run government as a business, is also very dangerous. You need to mix it with a little bit of welfareism or socialism, just like practiced in some countries in Europe and United States, where the people have the kind of social protection from the capitalists. But in Nigeria, I think what we are doing, we are going overboard. Where the Bola Ahmed Tinubu government is treating governance as a private company, as a company that must make profits. That is not governance. Governance is about, first of all, the security of the people. It's about the welfare of the people. And then you now talk about what you use to sustain those welfare and as well keep government afloat. But when you run it as a mere company, with mere numbers, profits, statistics, and the rest, you are going to destroy the very essence of governance. And that is why sometimes I say this government should slow down on some of these things, because Nigerian government is not a blue chip company. It's not a company quoted in the stock market in London or Lagos or anywhere. They are not in the race for profit. Their work is to enable the private companies to make money, not trying to strangulate the citizens with multiple taxation.
Very well said, Mr. Igboke. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning. Mr. Ambrose Igboke is a media consultant, the chairman of Guild of Public Affairs Analysts of Nigeria, Enugu State Chapter. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Appreciate it. All right, I'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking insecurity. There was a video, I'm sure you maybe chanced on it, but if you didn't chance on that video, there was a girl, gun pointed at her, and people who kidnapped her were demanding for 20 million naira before her release. Well, the story around is that she may no longer be alive. But we're going to get to all of this with a person who has been very passionate about trailing these kinds of stories and even helping to rescue them. Harrison will be joining us in just a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back. And so we're starting off with security this morning. Why does kidnapping thrive more than a decade after the Chibok abductions? And even more so, much more than a decade after the era of kidnappings in Nigeria's Niger Delta. Indeed, the kidnapping space has been identified as a cottage industry in the past by the international media. In recent times, SBM intelligence has identified that over 4,700 abductions have been recorded this year alone. There's someone who's been, providing intervention in that area. You could call him your community knight in shining armor or your community police. This morning on the program, Mr. Harrison Gwamnishu joins us. He is the founder, let's have it now, of, he's a founder of Safe City Foundation Security Organization. Good morning, Mr. Gwamnishu. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
And so there's so many, areas to touch as far as insecurity is concerned with you. But your work seems to cover a lot of the Delta State and Edo State area. Give us a sense of how rampant kidnapping is in that area, and of course those spots that are flashpoints, such that Nigerians can be educated about these challenges in these areas in the South.
Okay, from late last year, the kidnapping, within Kogi State, Edo State, and Delta became something else. All right, it's no longer kidnappers going for rich people, going for wealthy people or politicians, but they are going for anybody they see on the road, it becomes a target to them. And these guys are not kidnapping with vehicle. Like kidnappers will come, where you are driving, they will just use the vehicle to block you. No, they are using foot. So meaning that they are not on mobile, but they will kidnap you and then they will move you with leg, to the forest where they keep you and then collect ransom from you. All right. These guys are not even up to 5 or 6 members of each of the gang, and there are numerous of them in various communities. So it has become a challenge to everyone, including the motorists. Now, if you get to Kogi State, some of them wear military uniform, they wear camouflage. So imagine you driving on the expressway, you see men on military uniform, you think they are soldiers or they are, and then you stop over maybe to park for them to check, and then they attack you, they kidnap everybody in the vehicle. This is how bad it has gotten to at this stage. Now, if you get to Delta State, these guys they use the bush as a cover, the forest as a cover. So what they do is to get to isolated areas, houses that are built in isolated areas, and they lay ambush. As you're coming back to your house, they will kidnap you. The farmers, those who go to the farm, also kidnap you, and millions are paid daily. And to shock you, these guys they have mobile phones. When you are kidnapped, you use your phone to call for ransom. They don't hide. Before, you see them hiding numbers to call for ransom, but now they have open numbers that they use to call for ransom. And now you're not bringing ransom to dump somewhere. You keep ransom for them, maybe in the junction, they come and pick it up. No, you are bringing a ransom to the leg. It's give and take. You give them the ransom, they bring out your relative, they hand over to you, and you leave. So that's the challenges that we have now. So currently, there are many of them within this state I have mentioned, and they are kidnapping daily unchallenged. Daily unchallenged. It's everyday kidnapping within Kogi State, Edo State, down to Delta State. But currently, Delta State is a little bit liberated. It's no longer before like everyday kidnapping. It has stopped because of the effort of the security agencies, including our organization, to assist the security to ensure that these guys leave our state. But currently, Edo State, Kogi State, and partly Ondo State and Kwara State are badly affected. It's everyday kidnapping and ransom payment.
So what are your observations about these kidnappers, when ransom is delivered or if arrests are made? Do they appear to be citizens or indigents from those areas, from those states, or are they kidnappers who are moving from one state to another and finding a safe haven for their heinous activities?
He was carrying guns, because this is more than 46 cases of kidnapping incidents for the past 6 months. I have gotten involved in terms of helping victims to reach out to the security agencies. Most of these kidnappers are not indigent. That's the reality. But they have the backing of some indigents who give them food items, because these kidnappers, they live in the bush, who supplies them with smoke, who supplies them with drugs, who supplies them with power bank to enable them to charge their phones. So the community, some of them are enabling them because they get stipend from them, they get something from them. And again, the communities, most of them don't know that they are kidnappers. These guys come to tell them that they are car bearers, they are elders. So the kind of man who sees them on the road will think that they are elders. We assist them to go and purchase stuff, becomes the errand boy. So these guys are not indigent. They are the ones we have arrested, the ones the security agencies neutralized are not indigents. They are from the other part of the country, this country. Like most of them, when you get them, the Hausa man will tell you these are Fulanis, that they are not Hausa, because Hausa can easily identify their own. Fulani can identify their own, but they are saying that these guys are Fulani by tribe. So they are not indigents. These guys being in the bush are not indigents. The indigents, the kidnapping carried out by indigents, they always come with vehicle, they kidnap and they take you somewhere camping in the house or in the water. They don't camp it, they don't live in the bush. The kidnappers, indigents that we know, that we have arrested who are involved in kidnapping are not using the bush, the forest as a cover. The ones using the forest as a cover are these ones who are non-indigent. Some of them are arrested. If you check the police record, they will tell you these are Fulanis. Fulani man, someone will tell you they are Fulanis. So these are the issues we are having. So they are non-indigenous.
It's interesting about how criminality thrives in times like this. Harrison, let's talk about because you've been on the ground, so is your testimony against theirs, and I'm sure the police will also have records as to the ethnic selection. But for me, this is more about the crime being committed, which is a bigger focus here. So let's do some unpacking. The unpacking here is, what level of sophistry in terms of ammunition do these guys have? And let's begin with that, because it looks like, because people always ask the question, how come they can make calls and then they are not able to be traced and all of that? When you hear these kinds of questions and this kind of concern, what do you make of it? You've literally been risking your life. We're going to come to that in just a moment.
Okay. These guys are with AK. None of them are with hunter's gun. They are with, AK-47 rifles. Because for me, I have witnessed it live. We've gone to the point where we train them to their camp, and then there was a exchange of gunfire between the security, military, and then these are armed men. They are with AK-47 rifles. Some of them are 5 in numbers, and if they're 5 in numbers, 4 persons are fully armed. 1 will have a cutlass. Sometimes 3 will be armed. 1 will have a cutlass, 1 will have a stick. All right. Now, the one at the front is always the one showing them the way. Now, these ones are the ones who have lived in that community for a long time, who knows the terrain. So he shows that one. Is a guide. He shows them how, where, and areas they have to maneuver to get to where they are going to. And they move from one location to the other. All right. Now, the tracking aspect. The DSS have a tracking device. The police have a tracking device. Some government houses in the state have tracking devices. Now, what they now do is they have agents, they have civilians who they employ as trackers. These civilians go out to the public to go and collect jobs from people, like tracking job for people. They pay them, and then the civilian will now go and pay the security agencies for tracking. So that's how the system is operating in Nigeria. So now for you to track a suspect, you need to pay money. Sometimes for you to track suspects, most of the time you don't pay, because maybe they feel you are an influencer person. That's why I'm here. I'm filling the gap now. So when somebody is kidnapped, the security agencies will know that I'm involved in the matter. They will quickly run the tracking analysis for us. Now, the tracking work most of the time. It doesn't work. Sometimes it leads you to the mask. The mask where they are using the mask connected to the phone, to the calling center where they're calling from. So the tracking can take you to the mask. The mask can be in the center of the community, while the kidnappers are in the forest. So to get to the forest, it will be difficult for them to get to the forest. All right. So, but the only way I've always told people about this, how to get these guys, is to live in the bush. If you live in the bush, you lay ambush in the bush in the night, these guys will pass. But they don't go through they don't move victims through the daytime, because people will see them. So they always move at night. So if they kidnap in the daytime, they move straight to somewhere hidden where they can stay. In the night, they move, they advance, they move from one location to the other. So for us to get these guys, both the military, the police, the DSS, or the vigilante, it is a night movement, night operation. Let us, all of us, go and live in the bush. If you watch some videos I have posted on my page, those videos I were shot around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. These are the time that these guys can be apprehended. So, but to track them is difficult, because 1, they are always with the victim. So if you are taking them to attack them, the victim you are going to rescue may be attacked. So it becomes futile. Your job you are going to do becomes futile. So these kidnappers, they are always with the victim. They sleep with the victim. They are just with them 247. They don't leave them. So if you are coming to attack them, it means that the victim there will be affected. So, but for you to gain access to them, it is a night operation. The military, the security have to go back to the bush and live in this bush. I've been in the forest. You saw there's a video where we are crossing river, also in Edo State. Some of the jobs were done in the night.
All right, Harrison.
A lot of stuff was recorded. So it is not going to match that point on the road.
All right, Mr. Harrison.
It is good, but to go inside this bush.
All right, Mr. Harrison. Yes, there's no way we'll have this. There are two parts. I'm sure Bukola has some questions for you as well. Before we begin to wind down, the lady we saw in that video, who the kidnappers had demanded 20 million naira for ransom, else she would not be released. That's the video. I'm sure some of you have seen it online. We're hearing stories that she's been killed, or what exactly is the state of where did this happen, and what's the latest update concerning this lady?
All right, so that's Aisha. Aisha was kidnapped around the Bira camp somewhere in Awuchi, almost going to a week plus now. And at first, the families were thinking to the stage kidnapping, all right, until the kidnappers were warning them to raise the money, raise 20 million naira ransom. From 50 million naira, they came down to 20 million naira. And the family can't raise the ransom before the kidnappers now made this video and forwarded it via own WhatsApp, her own line. The kidnappers are calling with her own number, forwarded to the family members for them to know that it is a very, very serious matter. That's the video you are watching now. So she's alive. Yesterday, they called again. The money that money should be paid between yesterday and today. And the family are trying to see how they can raise the ransom. There's a community fundraising for this girl currently, but there's no way the family have not seen such amount of money in their life before. So currently she's alive. They called in yesterday. She spoke to them. We spoke to the family, and some of us we may not talk something online anyway, but I believe the family will be able to raise something and then deliver to whoever that is the people who are holding her.
I know that government frowns at ransom paying, but Bukola, you have a question.
Yes, indeed. It would be remiss of us to have this conversation without asking you why you do what you do. We've seen you post videos, about you practically saying, if anything happens to me, my dad, my mom know I love you, and we see that you go to the forest in the dead of the night, risking your life. Why do you do what you do?
When it comes to skills, I lived with criminals while I was in prison. I was detained unjustly for 4 years, so I lived with some of these criminals. When you go to prison as a new inmate, you're able to share your story, what brought you to prison. So the cell where they kept me in the prison 2011 to 2015 was cell meant for armed robbers. So I've been able to understand how they behave, how most of them, how the story they share for us while in custody. So that's part of how I gain into gain experience in security, how to get these guys most of the time. Now again, in my community, as at last 6 months, a child, I have a video where a child, a minor, a girl, little brother of less than 12 years, the mother and the father were kidnapped in my community. Now, at the kidnappers, at where they were kidnapped, the kidnappers killed the father in the presence of that little boy and the sister. And I was among people who went to that place to bring the corpse, the decomposing corpse of the father. And when I brought them back, the little children were in my vehicle at my back seat, and they were crying. And they were telling me, brother, please help us fight for our late father. Help us fight for our late father. I have that video in my phone. The children were begging me to help them fight for the father. And since that time, I decided to mobilize volunteers in my community to advocate, to ensure that the security agencies step up and ensure they do the right thing by going after these kidnappers, because of what happened to those children. Those children today, they have no father. Their mother is a farmer, and they're suffering in the community. So whatever I'm doing today is because of what happened in the past, and which for me, as only child of my family, there's no fear about it. And I keep telling people, I said, these guys are human beings. There's no juju in them. It is the fear in us that is making us to relent. If we come out fully to fight these guys, we'll win them. And that's why I'm here. Currently, I'm in Imo State, Abia State, for just similar cases too. that is happening. So there's nowhere in this country that we cannot go. But if the security agency, the security police, the military can team up together and see how we can do this, we can achieve a lot. That's the reality.
And so how many times have you come close to, had a close shave with death?
That was last incident we went for in Kogi State. Before I left, I made a video and I was sent that video to a friend of mine. I was saying that, if anything happened to me, they should just, my mom and dad, there are people they can, take care of, As last 2 weeks of that movement, 9 civil defense officers were killed in that same location in Edo State. It was on the news. So it was 2 weeks after that we went for that movement where lawyers who were coming back from court to bar were kidnapped. So we went in to the forest. It was like the end. It was like a suicide mission, but to God be the glory that I'm here. Not just this one, there are several of them which I cannot mention here, where we have encounter with them face to face. They block us on the way. But because of the security, we don't move without security. That's the thing. So security have to move with us to this location. So we can't go there without them. We are civilians. We are not armed. So we are only helping them with the technical support, like in terms of drones, in terms of tracking devices and rest of them. Because we have access to some security agencies who can help us to track these people, almost immediately without waiting for 24 hours or, that's just it.
This is part one of this conversation on kidnapping and insecurity in Nigeria, and of course on the work that you do. We'll definitely have a part 2 and maybe even more subsequently as you make progress in your work. But we must anchor at this point, and thank you very much. Bear in mind that we appreciate what you do. Nigeria indeed appreciates what you do, and we hope for more support for your organization. And please stay safe as you continue. You have our prayers on that. We've been talking with Mr. Harrison Gwamnishu. He's the founder, Safe City Foundation, who has joined us virtually on this conversation. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
Wow. It takes a lot of risk.
Indeed.
I don't know, it's just a daredevil situation, but we must commend you, Harrison, and everyone in your team who helps to make this happen. But we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we talk about electoral reform. A legal practitioner joins us in just a moment. Stay with us. Let's bring in one of our go-to legal minds on the program. Ekemini is a legal practitioner joining us from Akwa Ibom State in New York. Ekemini, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
A lot of amendments is going on. Amendments are going on across board. Electoral Act amendment bill, even the Constitution amendment is still in the works. So there seems to be a lot of reform in that sense, or amendment as it is called. But let's focus on the Electoral Act. And one of the biggest highlights that has come out of the Electoral Act amendment is to the effect that now the committee that is putting out this proposal that will be finally laid before the chambers, both chambers of the National Assembly, to see whether it succeeds or not, proposing that the INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission, the electoral umpire, will not have the burden of proof and no longer the petitioner in this case when election litigations happen, whether at the tribunal or in court, whether it's the appeal court, whatever level of court there is. What do you make of this? Is this a good move? Will it change anything?
Well, I don't see it changing anything. I don't really see it changing anything. Why do I say so? Let me give a bit of a background. I have participated at the election petition tribunals for the respondents and for the petitioner in the last 3 rounds of election in this country. So I understand exactly what INEC comes to do in court, to do at the tribunal. The summary of what INEC comes to the tribunal to do is to tell the courts, my lords, the person that we declared as the winner of this election is truly the person that won. And how do they do that? They come to court with documents, certified through copies of documents, the result sheets, the forms evidencing cancellation of election, and every other forms that they come with. And so when they come, they tender those forms to the tribunal and then tell the tribunal, this is the person that we declared, and truly this is the person that won the election. Now, by law, when certified through copies of documents come from INEC, it is taken to be documents from proper custody, because no other person would be seen to have better documents than INEC. And so it's from proper custody. And when that application of proper custody principle is applied to the court situation there, to the tribunal there, then everything that INEC brings is largely admissible, largely accepted and acted upon by the court. Now, what is going to change now? When you shift the burden of proof from the petitioner to the respondent, is it going to change the fact that INEC will still come to the court with documents to prove their position? It is not going to change. So it's just a case of changing the goalposts. It's just a case of during the halftime of a football match, you see Arsenal switches to the other side, Manchester United switches to the other side. Okay, it doesn't change the goalposts. It's just a matter of parties. This one going this way, this one going the other way. It doesn't change the character of the goalkeeper of each of the sides. It doesn't also change the players. So what Nigeria wants, we need to go beyond changing the burden of proof, the position of the burden of proof. We need to look at the character of INEC. We need to look at the processes of election conducted by INEC. We need to amend beyond the burden of proof. Burden of proof simply means, sometimes it means who talks first in court. So whether it is the petitioner that is talking first, or it is INEC that is talking first, it doesn't change a bad election. It doesn't change the fact that our problem right now is beyond the issue of burden of proof. It is rather systemic. It is rather something that we need to go beyond. Now look at in the last round of election, Obi and Atiku Abubakar, they placed the election petition largely on the promise of INEC that IRAFE is going to be used and all of that. And then they said that it is in the guidelines of INEC. But when those matters went to the court, what did the court say? The court said that the guidelines of INEC cannot override the provisions of the Electoral Act. That it is only the Electoral Act that can make provision for IRAFE and the rest. So I'm thinking that rather than the National Assembly spending so much time on who carries the burden of proof, they should look at such a situation and then amend the Electoral Act to accommodate the guidelines of INEC, so that when INEC makes a promise that is going to be electronically transmitted, for instance, when someone goes to court, he will have a legal backing to anchor his points on and not just have it dismissed. So, like I said, it is beyond the issue of burden of proof. I do not believe that the burden of proof is going to change anything.
But don't litigants have more to worry about, particularly if Nigeria has not dealt with the challenge of the overbearing influence of politicians on INEC? Won't proof then be subject to manipulation if INEC now has the sole responsibility of the burden of proof?
So if we don't sanitize our electoral process and make it such that when election is held at the polling units, the result will stand. If we don't sanitize it, then we're just moving around circles. We're moving around in circles. You see, a bad election is a bad election, and a bad election can easily be defended by the umpire. By law, INEC becomes a necessary party in an election petition. And like I said, what do they come to do? They come to tender documents. Now, who has the documents? It is INEC that has the documents. Who has the stamp? It is INEC. Who has the authorization to certify? It is INEC. So, if it is true that INEC has been part and parcel of the adulteration of the electoral process, they will continue to adulterate the electoral process. Whether we give the burden of proof to them, or we take the burden of proof, the initial burden of proof from them and give it to the petitioner as it is now, or we give them the initial burden of proof, wherever the burden of proof is placed, someone will still come with documents, duly certified, admissible before the courts. There are decisions of the Supreme Court that will be cited to support the admissibility of documents coming from INEC, proper custody. So it's not going to change our story. What we need is a holistic sanitization of the electoral process. If we are amending the Electoral Act, which is very unfortunate, in other countries when laws are made, they are made to last for a long period of time. In our country, the Electoral Act is amended after every election. Every 4 years, it is the most amended piece of legislation in Nigeria. We must have a system in place where if we make a law today, it can last for 20 years. But we don't have that, so we have to keep amending. Now, as we're amending the Electoral Act, let the National Assembly look at issues that are realistic, okay? Very realistic issues, and not the issue of burden of proof. Burden of proof simply means sometimes who talks first. So it doesn't matter who talks first. What matters is a pure electoral system like we have in other countries. Look at Ghana. In the last 3 rounds of general elections in Ghana, the margin of victory is very slim. It is 55, 46, 56, 43, and so on. But as you have a very wide margin of victory and so on. So we need to work with the partners in the electoral process and ensure that whatever amendment we are making is a kind of amendment that will be realistic, is a kind of amendment that will allow INEC to apply technology to the electoral process. And when someone goes to court to challenge the flaw that has occurred, via the application of technology, the person will have a law to anchor it on, and not the current situation where the court will say, well, guidelines cannot take the place of the Electoral Act. We need to do more. We need to go beyond the issue of placement of burden of proof.
All right, Mr. Kemini, in doing more, and I'm learning a few things, and one of the things I'm just learning is to the effect that, which I would like you to speak to, is that, sometimes INEC is quite reluctant to produce election results. We've seen this situation before. So this one is particularly the fact that they will not only be required to produce the result, INEC will be required to defend the results. Isn't that a difference that this will make?
No, there's no difference. Practically speaking, demonstrating it in the courts, there is no difference. What's difficult in INEC coming to defend a bad election when they have all the results at their disposal? They fill in the forms, okay? They stamp it, they bring it to the courts. It's not difficult for them to defend. Why? Because the law already is in their favor. The law says that documents that come from INEC, results that come from INEC, duly certified and paid for, are from proper custody. So you that is challenging, it will take so much from you to be able to challenge. As a matter of fact, you need to also bring counter results to be able to counter their own results. So the odds, are still so much in favor of INEC. And therefore, theoretically telling INEC, you go to court, you defend, it's not different. What they have been doing so far is to defend what they have declared. So, some things are very beautiful when they're in theoretical form. But when you bring them to the practical courtroom for demonstration, you see that there's no difference. There's actually not going to be any difference if INEC is meant to bear the burden of proof this time around as against the petitioner. Because if the system is bad, INEC will still come and then defend a bad election and defend whatever they have declared. So I am rather of the opinion, the strongest opinion, that we need to look at the demons in our electoral process. And we deal with the demons. We deal with them holistically. Like I have said, the court said, IREF cannot stand because it is not in the Electoral Act, it is in the guidelines. In elementary jurisprudence, we were taught that if guidelines are made pursuant to the provisions of an act, the guidelines take the force of the act. But the courts have said recently that, IREF cannot stand because it is not in the Electoral Act. Now, I expect the National Assembly to amend the Electoral Act and then include a provision that will make IREF and other electronic gadgets introduced by the new chairman of INEC to stand. Anything outside that, then we're still telling the same story in different forms, still running in circles, and I don't see the electoral system of this country improving only or principally on the issue of burden of proof.
Backdrop of the intention of the National Assembly now, can we see the same zeal applied to this proposal for the change of date in elections to 2026, such that litigations matters can be settled before swearing-in date? This proposal for the burden of proof to be given to INEC. Can we see the same zeal in elements just as critical, some would say even more critical, to items on the electoral reform that have to do with INEC being placed on first-line charge, that have to do with the appointment of the electoral umpire and the powers of INEC to review its election result? Are you confident that we'll see the same zeal from the lawmakers in moving and accelerating those elements on the electoral reform? And would it move the needle?
Well, it might move the needle if the amendments are done holistically and honestly, and they are made in such a way that application is not going to be difficult. Because it is one thing to make provisions in the law. It's another thing to make it possible for it to be implemented. If not, you make a provision and one legal argument will throw it off balance and then returns us to where we have come from. So it might move the needle. As a matter of fact, members of the National Assembly, they have an obligation to the Nigerian nation to ensure that whatever amendment is to be done is done in the interest of the nation and not for their own, interest. Because you remember that there was an amendment that was done in the last electoral acts by the National Assembly to the extent that I think non-executive members of political parties were not to participate at congresses or something or primaries. And it ended up affecting so many of the legislators. They never saw that one coming. So they must be able to amend, not for selfish reasons, but amend for the Nigerian nation, because it's getting embarrassing that every round of election in this country had to end up in court. As a matter of fact, in most instances, it is the courts that decide for the people. So it's always sad when I see electoral panel is constituted. We go for election, and the next thing that you see being constituted is a panel of judges to try, the cases that will come from court, which already means that we know for sure that these elections will be, seriously disputed, and that's why we have kept aside judges to attend to these things. You hardly see this in other countries. They face election. They don't face litigation inside election. So we have a situation in this country where so much is given to the courts when it comes to the electoral process. We must be able to allow the courts to do other things. In American jurisprudence, very little is said of election. The same with other countries, even in Africa. So we must have a nation where our votes will count at the polling units. You see, INEC should not be taking Nigerians for granted. Remember the tenure of the last INEC chairman. He promised that a particular thing was going to be done. It was going to be transmitted real time. And when it was not transmitted, the argument we heard was there were glitches. The other one said, I never promised that. No, we must go beyond that. And the Electoral Act must be amended to provide consequences for the chairman of INEC who promises to do a thing and fails to do it only to come and tell us about glitches. We're not interested in glitches. We're interested in free and fair election at all times that elections are conducted. And Professor Amupiton, he has the first task on his shoulders, the Anambra election that is coming up next month. We want to see a new INEC where election results will count. We want to see an INEC that is like Ghana, where Dr. Baumea was able to call the current president of Ghana like 8 hours before the close of polls because he saw that the electoral process was transparent. Why do we not have transparent electoral process in Nigeria when we have all the resources, human and financial? I think that it should now be an embarrassment for Nigeria that every round of election is tested in courts. You have like 1,000 cases in courts arising from one election. I think it should be enough time for Nigeria to now say, enough is enough. Let us get it right. And to the National Assembly, if you are amending, we need to amend once and allow it to stay for 20 years. The American Constitution, for instance, was last amended in 1992. How many years now? That was the 27th Amendment of the American Constitution. They don't amend laws every time. So let the National Assembly amend the Electoral Act once and for all this time around and make it holistic. Let it be able to serve us for 20 years. And let us have the amendment to serve the nation and not the interest of the individual politician in the National Assembly.
Well, interesting points. I mean, as we begin to wind down, and you know, when it comes to our elections and litigations, they are like literally 5 and 6. And it's a systemic problem. It's not an isolated problem. We have a crisis of confidence across our institutions. So no matter what happens, you see, everything is literally being tested. We hope we can get to that day where even where we see neighboring countries with lesser population being able to declare results and nobody heads to court. But there's a generic question I want to ask you, since you've been in court and been part of electoral jurisprudence. Presidential election, for instance, and what I'm about to ask is why politicians, I think, behave the way they do. Because the average politician will tell you, especially when it comes to presidential election, if you don't win at the poll, on the field, forget about winning in court. Because of the level of proof that you need to have to be able to obtain a presidential election. Is that even possible in the first place?
Well, the burden of proof right now in the country, going by the principles in our law books, is such that for you to prove irregularities in a presidential election, you must prove it polling unit by polling unit. So if you are alleging irregularities in the entire 36 states of the Federation and all the polling units and all the wards, then you have that burden to prove all of that substantially before you can win a presidential election petition. And that's peculiar. In fact, that's impossible. You know, now we still have laws that say you must bring people polling units by polling units. In an age of technology, where we should have the electoral process fully in compliance with the computers and all that technology. How did Kenya decide the presidential election, the just concluded election, I think 2 years ago, where President William Ruto, the current president of Kenya, became announced as the winner? Raila Odinga took him to court, the late Raila Odinga, and it was decided in 14 days. Lawyers were heard, judgments given in 14 days, everything 14 days. It was made possible because the Kenyan electoral system has complied so much with technology. So it was just a matter of printing out what was done at the polling units and sitting down to compare notes and then make a declaration. But ours says you must bring in witnesses, polling units by polling units, and that makes it impossible for anyone to overturn a presidential election in Nigeria. So we must come to a point where we stop, making ourselves a laughing stock for the international community, where we still require people to come from their villages to prove what happened polling units by polling unit. Let us deploy technology to the electoral process. Any process in this life that has no business with technology is still in its stone age. I'm talking to you far away from where you are, and we are hearing ourselves. That's technology. For the electoral system of Nigeria not to apply technology the way it should and the way others are applying, this is the biggest bane of the electoral process in Nigeria. We must introduce technology. We must do so holistically and honestly. When people tamper with the electoral process technologically, there should be punishments for them. And this is what I expect the National Assembly to include in its amendment. Whoever becomes a victim, whoever becomes a culprit, whether it's a highly placed politician or so, or the person sent by the highly placed politician, or whether it's somebody from INED working in cahoots with politicians, let there be punishment. Let someone knows that as he is going in to adulterate the electoral process, there are consequences that he is going to face. And until we have that, it will be difficult to obtain any election petition, any presidential election petition in Nigeria, let alone, and others will still be, the same thing. So we need to be real to ourselves. To thyself be true. We need to tell ourselves that as a nation. We need an electoral process that is pure. And so anything that contaminates the streams of that process should be taken off. Amendments should be done to cure all of that so that we can stand firm as a nation that can proudly say the president was elected by all of us, the member of parliament was elected by me, and so on. Until we have that, then this country will not have that recognition and respect that we deserve from other countries of the world.
Keminidium, as always, thank you so much for your perspective. I think at the end of the day, we should just pray for courage for leaders of the institutions of state like INEC to be able to do the right thing, because we'll say all we can, but they are under a lot of pressure, sometimes even threats. We've seen some of them even killed. But we hope that we're going to get out of these murky waters someday to have credible elections where you know that if you lost the election, it's because you lost. If you won, you know that you won, and not anything else. Ekeminidim is a legal practitioner. Thank you so much. We'll allow you head to court now. Thank you. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
From legal issues, electoral reforms, we'll be shifting gears to issues around the Niger Delta. Yes, they say the goose that lays the golden egg. We'll talk about oil spill and that environment. Join us in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. And so we switch gears now to a conversation on the Niger Delta. Has it got its own fair share of the revenue from national development? Why are we still talking about environmental degradation decades after the discovery of oil? And more importantly, has a new chapter opened, particularly for Ogoni land, following the even distribution of the conferment of clemency on the Ogoni 9 and, of course, Ogoni 4. All these issues are related and important. Let's have this conversation. And joining us this morning is Mr. Cyril Eziaku. He's the General Manager, CEO, Clean Nigeria Associates Limited. And we also have joining us Mr. Lucky Igoyota, who's an energy consultant. And they both join us virtually this morning. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start with, indeed, let me start with Mr. Igoyota. I hope I got your name correctly. And let's look at what seems to be the most recent. Of course, the conferment of clemency on the Ogoni 9 and the Ogoni 4, and the plans by the federal government to begin exploration of oil in the Niger Delta. How are you weighing in on this development, and how well does it augur for Ogoni, considering the level of cleanup that has been achieved by HyPrep so far?
Yes. It's a commendable move by the government. If you look at it objectively. But is that enough? No. Like you said, given what HyPrep have been doing since the UNEP report came out, it's been in phases from 5 years. The first 5 years have been said to have achieved a whole lot in shoreline recovery and other aspects of the cleanup. But is that where we want to be? There have also been concerns around transparency and accountability. UNEP have had a mark $1 billion for a 20 to 30 years cleanup plan, offering clemency to people, the Ogoni 9, the Ogoni 4, that were involved in the agitation of oil and gas exploration and its effect in the ecosystem of Ogoni people is not enough. That's the political side of it. Now, although it sends a signal that the government is sensitive to calls among stakeholders on how best they can manage environmental concerns in the region, in Niger Delta, and not just Ogoni. But beyond that, we expect a scale-up of things as we move forward. It shouldn't just end there. But summarily, my position would be that it's a welcome development, like the way others have looked at it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Isiako, let's find out if you're on the same page on this one. How well-intentioned is the plan for recommencement of oil exploration in Ogoni following the consideration of this level of cleanup achieved by HYPREP?
Okay, first, I think we need to commend the efforts of government on what they've done so far to ensure that oil and gas exploration resumes again in Ogoni land. Because if you check some of the spill data and the news we have, since that area had been left out of operation, there's been a lot of further environmental degradation from sabotage and all the rest of them, because those fields have been left lying fallow. And so, and looking at the need for further development in the country, and the fact that other forms of energy are fast becoming much more preferred, it is important that we explore what we have at this point in time, and also in the process of doing that, better the lives of these Ogoni people we're talking about. But in doing that, I think it's important that a proper arrangement is worked out just to ensure that this new line of exploration ends up bettering the life of the Ogoni people and not degrading the environment further. And so there are necessary things that need to be put in place to ensure that whoever is going back there to further explore oil ensures not only just the development of Ogoni people, but a reduced further impact on the environment. So I think in all, I think it's a good thing that the government is trying to reopen operations in Ogoni land.
Let me stay with you for a moment as far as this operations is concerned. I'm looking at some of the data that is available, and it appears the numbers in terms of the incidence of spills is reducing, because I know that the NUPRC had also published to the effect that the incidence of oil thefts as well, based on their own data. But more importantly is how this affects the lives and the well-being and the livelihood of the people in the Niger Delta region, and what can be done to correct some of the damages that had occurred in this area. Now, sometimes it feels like there's a lot of lip service for political convenience when it comes to remediation efforts. And so when you see what is playing out and what has played out so far and some of the promises being made, how confident are you as a watcher that some of the things that government has promised as far as this is concerned will come to effect? And are the people themselves believing in the government enough to be able to help government to sustain and help to stop some of this spill that is as a result of sabotage in the places where sabotage is a cause?
Okay, so first of all, going back to operations there, in view of the current PIA, which makes provision for a whole lot of things, including development of the community where these operations are happening. I think if the PIA is fully enforced, that assurance is already there based on that. And then one of the key things also to ensure that the environment is also taken care of is that there are laws in the country. And I think it's about enforcement at this point in time. When we talk about remediation, we're talking about the second level damage repair. If you have a spill and that spill is contained as soon as it happens, you won't even get to the point where we're discussing some of the issues we're discussing now in terms of remediation in Ogoni land, and which is where we're saying that whoever is going back to Ogoni land or whoever is doing oil and gas operations in Nigeria should have contingency arrangement for oil spill. It is that contingency arrangement that enables you that when you have operational mishaps, it doesn't escalate. And most of these things we are seeing where we keep talking about remediation. Remediation is not the first option for mitigation. The first option for mitigation is containment and recovery when you have the spill. And there are arrangements that ensures that companies can deal with that. But unfortunately, a lot of companies operating in the Niger Delta and elsewhere do not have this contingency arrangement, and which is why we're saying that if regulators, following the tenets of the law, insist that you cannot operate within these areas if you don't have this contingency arrangement, then we'll have that assurance that, yes, even while the PIA ensures that the economic benefit of the oil production is given to the people, also the environment is preserved both for present and future generation.
And we hope that, with plans for the recommencement of oil exploration, that these companies that will begin work indeed have those contingency arrangement. And perhaps, I wonder if that's why the House of Reps is now demanding accountability of the cleanup process in Ogoni. You did raise that concern earlier on, Mr. Yogota, and I want you to speak to it, particularly why the communities seem to be pushing back on the demand for accountability by the House of Representatives on the ongoing cleanup project. Where are you on this? The environment, the communities say the federal government does not appropriate for the cleanup, hence they have no right to ask those questions. Do you agree?
I won't totally agree with them because probity is part of government's business. The legislative arm of government have the responsibility to carry out oversight, especially when it has to do with policies of government. The UNEP report, even though it's not a direct creation of the federal government, the federal government have the responsibility to ensure compliance and a follow-through to these things. So community stakeholders raising concerns around why would government be interfering, I don't think that is right. That shouldn't be the right approach to these things. Fine, they should be pressing for transparency and accountability in the entire process of the cleanup. But while doing that, they should also be cautious because the Niger Delta have been largely seen as a place with so much hostility, and that has also hampered development. Because even though the oil companies operate with reckless abandonment and all those disregard for international best practices when it comes to environmental mitigation activities, we must also try not to make attempts to support our environmental cleanup hostile. When they say, like the PIA, my brother there has talked about, fair made provisions for host community development trust. The host community development trust that we have in the PIA that is responsible to carry out projects in communities, can they also be involved in the environmental protection? Because environmental protection is everybody's business. It shouldn't just be the business of the operators, even though most of the damages are directly coming from the operations of these oil companies. I try to strike a balance that now that PIA is here with us, everybody is now a stakeholder. So for me, the community should tread carefully so that we don't make mistakes. We must have to get Ogoni right, which we also cascade down to other parts of the Niger Delta. There's a whole lot to be cleaned in the Niger Delta, not just Ogoni. Escravos is also environmentally degraded. For Kados, Ogula community, where I was born and raised, is also largely degraded. There are swamps there that you can no longer have aquatic life there. So it's not just Ogoni. Ogoni is in the picture because probably the efforts of Ken Sarua and Mite and those guys that did those global push for it, gained that kind of attention. There are other communities in the Niger Delta that are largely also degraded. The ecosystem is so polluted. So the cleanup is not just an Ogoni thing. It's also, by extension, calling for attention into other areas of the Niger Delta. And I'll use this opportunity to take community stakeholders to support policies that will help develop communities and not to be hostile to these things.
Mr. Goethe, let me stay with you for a moment. Let me stay with you for a moment. So, without lending any form of support to maybe anyone disrupting government policy or government program to be able to restore this environment, I was born and bred in the Niger Delta, so I know firsthand what these things are. But let's talk about what the PIA has provided for, because you need to reference something to be able to have confidence in the same thing that is being promised in other areas. What do I simply mean by that? They said the PIA, the 3% is for community capital project, the 75% is to go for capital project, about 20% is to go for endowment, and 5% for administrative costs. So far, so good. Have we seen that being implemented anywhere in the Niger Delta? And how widespread is it? Let's begin with facts.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very good question. I happen to be an advisor in one of the PIA arrangements in my community. It's Spate, where an oil company operates. Now, to a very large extent, I must tell you that it has not yet been fully implemented, per se. Fine, monies may have been defrayed and stuck in a particular designated account, but across board, I can conclude here and say very confidently that even though monies have been defrayed and stashed, there have not been actual capital projects showing that PIA has actually been fully implemented when it comes to host community development activities. So in answering your question directly, is we have a whole lot to do. Things are not yet in place. The bureaucracy in the implementation is too much. Where settlers have to be the secretary of the HCDT, and it is even the settlers that are detecting projects. Though you have the NUPROC people there that try to play a regulatory role and all, but we are still running it as if though the settlers, that is the operators, that will not be stating to the community what they should be doing. Their role there is just a nominal role in my own sense of it. You understand? Because the drafters and the intent of the drafters of that particular act, those lines, the intent is for full ownership for the communities. There are even issues now that kingdoms, because every community have kingdoms. The kingdoms where these communities are not even captured in the PIA. Don't forget that people are already calling for a review. Don't forget, about a month ago, even the president, through the Ministry of Finance, is pushing for a review in Chapter 8 even for this PIA. So PIA has done a whole lot for us, but it's not actually giving the dividend as expected because of the way we are operating it with the same old bureaucracy and old methods of doing things.
All right, Mr. Ezeaku, 60 seconds for you to also respond to the same question. As have the gains of the PIA trickled down to communities? Okay,
so, when we talk about communities, we need to first of all understand that the word community is not limited to a certain group of people. So, based on what was said in this conversation today, it was clearly stated that the number of spills and volume of spills are going down. So in terms of environmental dividend, it is clear that once we have those spills reducing, then at least the environment is being taken care of to a large extent. So when we begin to talk about individual benefits, one of the things I will say, I'm not part of those who are implementing the PIAs, or I don't have the details how it's implemented. But I know clearly that the government has a framework for how that will be implemented. And if there are issues or challenges with that framework, I think the onus is on the people who are stakeholders on these PIA issues to address them. Just like he said, the president is calling for a review and all of that. But what is most important for us as environmentalists is the fact that the number of spills in the environment are reducing, which is clear. And the reason it's reducing is because the community has some bit of benefit when the spills are reducing.
Yeah.
And they are complying with the fact that all those issues of sabotage and or unwarranted damage to oil and gas facilities becomes a negative for them. So for me, in principle, the PIA is doing a bit of good job, and there's no perfect document. It's work in progress, and all stakeholders will continue to work on the document to ensure that we all get the full dividends of the PIA. That would be my position on that.
Indeed, it's a collective responsibility. Hopefully, the people will own the process and indeed be abreast of the document as well, such that this conversation will not be lost on them because they are the bearers of the natural resource. We must anchor the conversation at this point, and thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. We've been talking with Mr. Cyril Eziaku, General Manager, Chief Executive Officer of Clean Nigeria Associates Limited, and we've also spoken with Mr. Lucky Igoyota, an energy consultant. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And there's more to come on the program. Just as we wind down, there have been some videos that have been resurfacing and been shared online. We have one coming through from Edo State, where the convoy of the governor appeared to have been stranded temporarily due to flooding, and we have that video coming through.
Governor's convoy or an official, but that looks well, definitely some government official passing through, because this is quite you see the flags and all of that. But I almost said I'm happy, but happy in the sense not in a bad way. Sometimes officials need to experience these things, because sometimes when they experience this thing, it helps to drive it home. So people are not just talking, people are not just saying things. So whether this is a governor, his deputy, but we understand this video is coming from Edo State, where the bad state of this particular road. I wish I can find out exactly where this is precisely, but it just tells you how bad this particular road is. I think it was raining and it flooded, and it looks, the color of the water on the ground feels like either construction is ongoing or it's just a bad road ab initio. So when government officials experience this kind of thing, I think it forces them to have a rethink. I was coming from Abuja. I don't know, I don't want to call it state, but as I was landing in Lagos, I realized that there's a particular part I suspect is Ogun State. I may be wrong. If you look from above, you see a lot of this red mud. A lot of it means a lot of bad roads in some of those areas. But well, now that whoever it is, whether it's the governor, the deputy, or a top government official is passing through this, they'll have a rethink.
Well, it appears that indeed this is the convoy of the governor. If you consider the flag, the SUV, and the number of vehicles in the convoy.
You've not seen anything.
You hit the nail. You hit the nail on the head.
You've not seen some honorables move.
There should be an even distribution of these challenging experiences, in difficult situations, such that there can be more responsiveness from from the authorities in attending to this infrastructure deficit. There you have it. But there's something else coming through, and Jeffrey, you have it.
Yeah, in the I said the Bendel region. You know, it was Delta and Edo as Bendel region. There where you understand the Nigerian police officer fired at a car tire around the hotel. So just watch this for a moment. Watch. Maybe our producers can roll it back so we'll see it again. For whatever reason, he chose to fire. Maybe the guy did not want to stop or whatever may have happened. He chose to stop the vehicle by firing the tire. See? Well, talk about heightened recklessness and unprofessionalism. You just watched it live for this particular officer. Well, the police in Delta State has actually responded. The police in Delta State, the PRO, SP Bright Edafe, who is quite popular on social media, said, in all honesty, this is embarrassing, shameful, careless, so unprofessional, and not justified at all. The policeman has been identified, detained, and will appear before the CP today. Let him go and explain himself, because what he did could have killed him or hurt him or someone else, maybe a ricochet, or a bounce off, if you will.
And it could have also resulted in an altercation, you know, that would have turned, you know, awry. And so it's good that we have some form of accountability coming through from that particular story. And this is happening in October, days after Nigeria marks the anniversary, the 5th anniversary of #EndSARS.
Which was on Monday,
this
right?
Speaks again to training. What kind of training are the security agents receiving? Just before we go, we have just one more. The Osun State government has appointed Afrobeat superstar Devt Adeleke, of course, your own Davido, as the chairman of the newly established Osun Sports Trust Fund. So congratulations to Davido.
Bringing his, some people say it's family business. Others will say he's bringing his star power to raise the fund or manage the fund. But all of that. Anyway, but we're just bringing you highlights of some of the things we have binged through and bring you some of the highlights of it so that you just follow through the stories. We'll be back again, God willing, tomorrow for another edition of the program. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. Bye-bye. Of
course, Sunrise Daily is up next, so stay with Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.